Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is your favorite warlock practicing necromancer, and today I want to expand your minds even further. Um, Today I'm going to do a book review on two different books. The first is a very well-known Stoic book by the name of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Okay, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Very, very good book. The other is called The Science of Being Well by Wallice D. Wattles. Okay, so you have the Book of Meditations and The Science of Being Well. Okay, now the second one is basically more of a pamphlet, in my opinion, compared to a book like Meditations, but it's still pretty good because as those of us who transgress the abysmal planes, working with various different spirits such as the Loa, the Orisha, let's go with demons even, because we choose to work with them, especially if you work with the infernals. One of the things that they bring to the table is mental and emotional balance. They bring together strategic mental reflection, observation, and most important is discipline. So how does this go along with religious practice and or even philosophical practice for that matter within the left-hand path or the right-hand path practices? Well, first of all, let me get into it. We'll start off with meditations. Okay? Now, right now, I am currently reading this book for the second time within a week. It's only got roughly about 190 pages. So it's really not that big of a book. You can read this book in a day if you want. I broke it down into 3 days and then, now I'm doing it again. I love this book because each time you read it, you get something new out of it. So I'm going to go back to, let me go back to page 10, chapter 2, number 2. It says, whatever this is that I am, it is a little flesh and breath, and the ruling part. Throw away thy books, no longer distract thyself, it is not allowed. But as if thou wast now dying, despise the flesh. It is blood and bones, and a network, a contexture of nerves, veins, and arteries. See the breath also. And it goes on from there, right? Now, the ironic part is that when you get up to, I believe it's chapter 4, which is roughly page right here, IV, page 25, it says, let no act be done without a purpose, nor otherwise than according to the perfect principles of art. Now, what is art? Okay? Is it the meditation? Is it the rituals? What is it? Is it the summoning process of the rituals that we do? Now, one of the ones that I really liked is on page 80. And even if you go back to, say, page 78, you still got some more things that go along with hermeneutics, the Kabbalah aspects, such as working with the tree of life versus the tree of Da'ath. You're working on, your shadow self compared to your living self. If you're following Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hebrewism, Catholic, Roman Catholic, Orthodox Christianity, or you get into, say, the African Caribbean traditions, which incorporate folk saints and such as the Loa, the Orisha, for an example, or even Holy Death herself, Santa Morte, okay? The Exu, even. You're working with beings from a light perspective, such as Lucifer, okay, the enlightener, okay. Now, here's the kicker. So you'll be working with things like repentance, or if you're dealing with things like, let's say for example, you cheated on your spouse, or you did something that is contrary to your nature, and you really want forgiveness for it. You'd probably be thinking Crime and Punishment, which is a book that I may or may not do down the road as a review, because I do own that book, by the way. Very, very good book, but it's really drawn out. So, but this one here, like I said, on page 78, it talks a lot about, for an example, number 9 and 10. Number 9 is short. It says, let no man any longer hear thee finding fault with the court life or thy own, with thy own. And then it goes into repentance is a kind of self reproof for having neglected something useful. Okay? Now think about it. Look at relationships. Relationships end because one party is neglecting the other. Your job ends because you neglect your duties. Okay? So it goes into a number of different things when you are not being open, but also observant to your duties and your stature within the community, within your career, within your family life. So you really want to pay a close attention to that. And then once you get on to page 80, like I said, number 22 is one that I really liked. And it says like this: attend to the matter which is before thee, whether it is an opinion or an act or a word. Thou sufferest this justly, for thou choosest rather to become good tomorrow than to be good today. Okay? So that really goes along with Hermeneutics. It really goes along with the Kabbalah, because most people feed into the tree of life rather than practice both the mirror image of the tree of life and the tree of death, or Da'ath, as it's called, DA'ATH. So it really goes into such things. And I really like this book because when it comes to reflection, when it comes to meditation, when it comes to building your life on a firm foundation, it doesn't matter if you're in the ministry like myself, or, as a multi-faith minister, an occultist, a consumer, if you will, somebody who offers their services to the community within my specialities or not. But it's more of the fact that you want to build on a firm foundation, and to do that, you need to be level-headed. So if you're working with the infernals, for an example, let's say the 9 Goetic kings of the Goetia, for an example, each one has their own things, from persuasion, sciences, and magical abilities, okay, such as manifestation, evocation, stuff like that. But it's more than that. Each one of these beings brings you closer to your true self. And that's the key to that. And I really liked meditations because it was so practical. It's not just spiritual, but it's also physical. Dealing with people can be emotional. It can be mentally exhausting. So putting that stuff into the forefront of everyday life, which is why it's important to meditate and to reflect upon your day's events, but also, what you have to do that day. It's not just about waking up in the morning, meditating, reflecting upon what you got to do during the day. But at night, when you go in to meditate, it's about reflecting about what has occurred. What has occurred that has made you stray from your path? Okay? What is it that has led you down a road of desolation to where you've either got a stressed out relationship with either the deities that you work with or your spouse, your family? Very, very cool things. And I really like Marcus Aurelius because he was a wise man. He wasn't just in the Senate. A lot of people don't realize that he actually grew up and got into the ministry. It was I mean, we've all heard of um, the ministry going all the way back, about 2,500 years, but there was actually a very ancient ministry in Egypt, which a lot of people don't know about. So, and because he was a Middle Eastern philosopher, you know, I think his works really bring fruit to today's world, and I think everybody should actually take the time to acquire this book, to read it, to literally reflect upon the words chapter by chapter. Very, very good. Now, when we speak of mentalism, when we speak of emotional balance and harmony, if you're an occultist, this is something that is well known in the occult community. Is when no matter what you're dealing with, you have to be centered. You have to have that firm foundation to build upon. And I think Wallice D. Wattles brings that and more. Even though he was a Christian, and I'm going to put that right out there for you, and it may turn you off, but before it turns you off, let me just hear me out. He talks a lot about most emotion in life and everything. The principles of health. When we think of today's journey, I'm going to pick on my son's mother at this point. When she broke up with her ex-boyfriend, one of the things that she did, and I pick on her for this, because I believe it was Bob Carlson who said it best. If you have the energy to go out and get a self-help book, then why the fuck do you need somebody else to give you an opinion? You've already made up your mind that you need help, right? You already need to figure out what the fuck's going on, which is why you're going out to get a self-help book. Okay? It's like getting a book for dummies on, how to do things online, or how to deal with people, how to do math, math for dummies or whatever it's called. You remember those books. They've been out for like 30 years. But still. So I kind of pick on her a little bit about this, and I find it stupid because to me it's just another way for you to piss away money that you really don't need to do. So, if you realize you got a problem, then you've got to sit there and figure out what is causing this outbreak of emotional turmoil. What is causing me to be out of balance, with my equilibrium or my harmony? What is causing that disruption within that harmony? Well, that's up for you to figure out, right? But reading this book, this little template, you got the principles of health, and it's done by self-observation. And I really like that. The foundations of faith. If you're in a religion where you're working with the deities such as Zeus, Anubis, Belobog, Chernobog, let's go with Ra or Anubis, even if you're dealing with God and Satan or Michael and Lucifer, you got to have faith in these beings, right? You got to have faith that these beings not only exist, but that they're opening the doors for you and helping you to become a better version of yourself by leading you and educating you within apotheosis. So what do you think? Faith, why is it important? What is the way that you think about your day-to-day, abilities? When we get into chemistry or let's go with physics, one of the big things today is physics, right? So we know that every action has a cause and effect. Every action has an action and a reaction. A magnet can either repel or to attract, right? So a lot of what pagans and Wiccans do today, all these white lighters, is they talk to you more and more about your way of thinking. Hell, even the JCI do this, the Judo-Christian institutions. They'll sit there and talk to you a lot about redemption, about being reborn again, being, godly and all this stuff, right? Well, think about it like this. It doesn't matter what God that you worship. It doesn't matter if you worship Satan. It doesn't matter if you worship Pan. You know, let's go with Zeus, or let's go with Thor. You know, how about one of the more less known deities? Let's go with Kakashi the Deathless, the Immortal. How about Baba Yaga, the Witch? You know, do you know what level you have to be that powerful, right? But how do you get to that power, you know? And a lot of that is done by being mentally balanced, harmony within yourself, right? So I'm going to bring something up here real fast. Let me get to it real fast. You know, I believe it was Wang Lipping that said in Taoism, the alchemy of Taoism, eat, what is it called? Taste and eat bitter. Okay, it's called to eat bitterly. So you have to eat a lot, you have to shovel a lot of shit to get to where you're at, right? Very, very good thing. So here we are, page 14. Bottom left corner, the summary of mental actions, right? Let me now summarize the actions and altitudes necessary to the practice of the science of being well. First, you believe that there is a thinking substance from which all things are made, and which in its original state permeates, penetrates, and fills the interspace of the universe. The substance is the life of all, and is seeking to express more life in all. It is the principle of life of the universe and the principles of health in man. Okay? But let me go back a couple of pages here. The use of the will, page 11. In the practice of the science of being well, the will is not used to compel yourself to go when you are not really able to go, or to do things when you are not physically strong enough to do them. You do not direct your will upon your physical body or try to compel the proper performance of internal function by will power. Now think about that for just a minute. You have the will, and then you have the physical body that you think with, right? So by the time you get into the faith and the appetites, the eating of what you want to reap, it comes down to your faith, right? So on page 9, the principle of health is moved by faith. Nothing else can call it into action, and only faith can enable you to relate yourself to health and sever your relation with disease in your thoughts. Now, I want to give you a story at this point. Back in 2009, I was a practicing Satanist, you know, and I found it interesting. The first time I was invited to a church. It was an apostolic church. And so I said, fuck it. Yeah, why not? I'll go, you know? And here it is. I found it interesting because there was a lot of testimonies. There was a woman with cancer, right? She went daily, or not daily, but weekly, and each time the news was grave, but she put her faith in her deity, okay? Her faith in her deity. She put her mind in that state frame that I'm not going to let this shit get me down, right? So after months of praying, after months of laying it on the altar, she went back. Doctor baffled. The cancer was completely in remission. Now think about this for an example. We see testimonies in this in the Bible, right? The Gospels. The blind man being able to see through alchemy. You know, the spit in the dirt being rubbed into the eyes with just a word, right? the speech. And it's the same thing as if you write it down, you make it reality, right? You make it reality. So right there, you made it reality. So therefore, you've stepped up to that position physically. You've put yourself in that mind frame of saying, I will complete this. I will do this. And then furthermore, you have the faith in yourself, not just in those that you work with, to go forth and do this. It's amazing to see, right? And it doesn't matter if you are, say, for example, reading the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey. And one of the big things is that a lot of people tend to quote the 9 satanic statements, the 9 satanic sins, the 11 satanic rules of the earth, the 21 satanic points, or the infernal maxim. Okay? This is just regurgitated materials that people are just spreading. But think about what each one of these rules or these sins can do to you. If you have counterproductive pride, forgetfulness of past orthodoxies, for an example, then you've already made up your mind that there is no God, there is no heaven, there is no hell, there is no, Loa, Orisha, demons, angels, the old pagan gods. There's no folk saints. Magic doesn't exist. So it kind of puts that into perspective of, okay, you've closed your mind. You've closed your mind off. You physically think this shit don't matter. So you believe as an atheist that anything proven by science is reality, but yet 2,500 years ago, let's say 2,500 years ago, what was considered alchemy and spiritual alchemy is now considered being proven as scientifically accurate stuff, like astrology. For an example, numerology. How about herbalism, which has paved way for how many medications to be produced through synthetic forms in a petri dish? Wow, okay. Scientific through alchemy produced gunpowder. How about bombs and stuff like that, right? So you're seeing how all of this from 2,500 years ago is now being made reality over the last 100 years within medicines and scientific discoveries, or what they claim as scientific discoveries, which has been around a lot longer. And people believe it because they did book burning, they controlled the information, religious belief structures, fighting for dominance, the whole kit and caboodle. But when in reality, we've been practicing this stuff for hundreds of thousands of years. So reading something as simplistic as this, and I'm just gonna read something to you real fast. I'm gonna get into page 21, and it's called "In a Nutshell." There is a cosmic life which permeates, penetrates, and fills the interspace of the universe, being in and through all things. This life is not merely a vibration or form of energy. It is a living substance. All things are made from it, and it is all. Okay? It is all and in all. Okay? Now think about that for just think about that for just a minute. Christians love to preach this. Okay? Their God is everything, right? Their God is everything. He is in all, is all. I am the first, the last, the beginning, and the end, right? But they forget to tell you that there is all kinds of offshoots to this current. If you read The Black Path by Marionette Press, you'll understand what I mean by an aspect of a current. There are so many currents that connect to the original current, with each one of these claiming to be the original. But only one religion, it's called Sufism, for an example, which is an offshoot of Islam. It's a more radical version of it. Deals with both black magic and white magic, if you will. Deals with ritualistic and faith. Okay? And the ironic part about that is that what I just read to you in the nutshell, not just faith, not just mental, it's everything. It deals with all levels. And one of the things that when you work with the Infernals and you work with the Infernal Empire, you'll notice over time the different degrees in depth that you get into. You're finding that the things that you used to be so into have suddenly become obsolete. People that were more of a, let's say, a distraction to you. Energy vampires, if you will. The psychic vampires, as Michelle Belanger put it. You know, these people are removed from your life. You're becoming more dedicated, more committed to your practices. And I find it interesting how the more in depth that you get with working with these beings, working through faith, working through balance and meditation and reflection, putting forth the work into rituals, alchemy, and everything. You're literally looking at yourself, your world, what you're trying to build, what you're trying to create, to manifest. And it all comes down to energy manipulation. Where are you directing your energy from or towards? You know, where are you directing your attention? A lot of people today, you know, and I have to laugh when you got people in their 30s still living in your mama's basement, okay, playing video games when people should be out making a life, you know, having a family, you know, working jobs, creating jobs for yourself, creating a life. And that really comes down to you doing that work, realizing that this is who I am, this is what I want to be. It doesn't matter if it's, you know, you got this, you know, some kind of diagnosis such as, let's go with mood disorder. How about schizophrenia? You know, how about you're disabled? You know, perhaps you're in a wheelchair for life because you got a broken, a severed spine. You know, it doesn't matter. That's a limitation to most people. But when you sit there with that mind frame, you get into that mind frame going, okay, I can't use my legs. I don't think as fast as somebody else. I may be bipolar by nature, which means, you know, you can have flashes of extreme rage 1 second and be normal the next. And a lot of that would get you canned from a job, which is why we have the laws that we do. When it comes to corporations, they have to realize, okay, this person suffers from a mental disorder, and everything's a disease today anyways. You know, so I'm just saying. So we got medications for just about everything, but they don't cure anything, even though they can do that. And that's very evident. But here it is. The reason I like these two books is because, number one, it gets you into that state of reflection. It helps you to understand both aspects, you know, both sides of the spectrum. It gets you thinking about what makes you happy. What is it that you like doing? You know, do you like reading? Well, other people are going to pick on you for being a bookworm, a geek, because you like to read. Wow, okay. You know, people will sit there and go, "Oh my God, you're a fucking gamer. How lame is that?" Well, guess what? Cupcake. Do you know how many adults grew up playing video games and some of them are actually millionaires right now? Why? Because they grew up and got jobs doing what they love to do. They get paid to test out video games. You know, people like to hack. So what happens? They grow up and became computer specialists within computer security, personal security. Interesting, right? Mathematicians, those who are good at math, have grown up and became electricians. Internet, workers, where they go and they hook up everything. People who like alchemy, for an example, and herbology, got into becoming pharmacists. I would go to a pharmacist before I went to a doctor any fucking day. Why? Because a pharmacist has more knowledge than a regular doctor. That would be like going to a brewer or a brewer who owns a botanica. Do you know what it's like to go there and go, hey, this is what I'm suffering from. This is what's going on in my life. Well, guess what? Here's this, this, and this. Do it 3 times a day for, a week. Done. Wow. Okay. Wow. Sure. Cool. Ironic how that works, right? So people who like to talk will become one of 2 things: politics, a news crew, or a creator on YouTube. Wow. Ironic, right? Now think about it this way. That's mental health. That's mental stability. That's physical faith. Because you're not just doing religious purporities, practices, but you're relating to your goals. You're building an empire. You're getting paid, or in my case, not getting paid for doing these videos. Why? Because I do these videos because they are a living journal. Okay? I do it to help other people out. I don't have to do this, but I choose to do this because I want to help newbies along the path of business and religious belief practices. Okay? I look at it as a living journal. That's the way I look at this. So, depending on where you are in your life, I would highly recommend these 2 books being the first 2 that you go out and get. And like I said in past videos, I have roughly just about 40 books, that of a book list that I recommend for a lot of different things, from strategic to mental, physical, emotional, finance, how to socialism and stuff like that. There's a lot of different things that these books really cover, and it's not just about religion. It's also about philosophy. It is about you as the practitioner. It is about your growth. And these are designed to bring you into that balance, to get you out of the, well, I'm going to quote Robert Kakashi at this point, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He likes to speak a lot about the rat race. Think about it like this. If you're so wrapped up in what is going on in the world, how are you growing? If you're so wrapped up in what's going on in socialism, or let's go with social media type things, if you're so wrapped up in what's going on in the news, you're not building a life worth living. Okay? And this is why. There's a book, it's more of a pamphlet. It's called 1440. This was actually referenced to me once, and I actually went out and read it. And I found it interesting because if you look at what the world is designed to do, it is not designed for your benefit. It doesn't matter how many laws are in place. It doesn't matter what your rights are. They keep you in suspense, in fear, in servitude for a reason. The news is designed to keep your emotions high. Work is to keep you stressed out and occupied. You're just basically a pawn being moved across the chessboard. That's all you are. You know, if people are so wrapped up with the latest designs, the latest fashion, the latest model of iPhones, technology upgrades and everything, you must have before it's too late. That gets you into consumerism. Okay? So you're not helping you, you're helping somebody else remain rich and in power. You're not empowering yourself. And that's the thing I liked about 1420. Is it really opens the door saying, hey, this is how they present everything, from advertisements to your radio broadcasts to your TV channels that you watch on world news, to what the government is saying and doing. All this is designed to keep you in suspense. But when you sit there and you go, you know what? I'm going to separate from this. I'm going to separate from this. It's time for me to live my life and say, fuck you to the world. Fuck you to the world. And I recommend raising those fingers high. Okay? Because when you've had enough of the dark psychology and manipulation of corporations and the governments of the world, you're going to pull away from that world. When you get tired of the BS and the shit, this is what the Infernals do. They literally strip you of the things that don't matter, the things that are holding you back. And before you know it, you're going to sit there and go, damn, I used to be just like that years ago. 8 years ago, I used to sit there and go, okay, you want to start a war with me? I'm going to kick your fucking ass to the fucking curb and back. Now, I don't even respond. I don't respond. In fact, I've been pulling away from social media. I get on once in a while, do a video, or I'll upload a video to like Facebook or TikTok, maybe even a photo here, or do a live video here. But outside of that, I'm not online. Why? Because I'm too busy spending time with the dogs. I'm too busy spending time with my cats. I'm spending time with my son. I'm spending time doing game night with my son, taking him and on occasion a friend of his to the park or out for ice cream. Okay? I sit there and will play video games with my son for a little bit. I help him with his homework. You see, these things are what matters in a family setting. What brings you stability and happiness is when you're sitting there with family. It doesn't matter if his mom is there or not. It does help when she's there because we can sit there and do things together with our kid. But a lot of times she's either at work or he's just staying with me and she's home. But either way, it works because that is what makes me happy as a father, as a parent. Okay? I get to spend time with them. When I go to her house, those dogs, their eyes light up. Those tails are just going. They're like, yes, Dad's here. I get to go outside. I'm not cooped up. I come home, I'm met at the door by my cats. Okay, they can get quite mouthy, but still. I'm just saying. But you got to look at it this way. What is meaning in your life? Are you teaching your kids something meaningful? Are you teaching them and leading them by example? Or are you trying to force something down their throat that is going to limit them? Okay? I want you to think about this. One of the things I learned from this and this is this. It used to be that information was a privilege. Okay? If you go back to World War II, between 1917 and 1956, books were burned. Knowledge was limited. The ability to speak freely was limited in the old world. Now, think about it this way. Now we're in the 2026. Okay? You think you have more freedom. You think, okay, I have all these rights. But yet everybody limits those rights, right? So think about it this way. When you look at it, You look at these works and you see they don't just give you that information in a pure text, a pure context of the way it is and was back in the day, but they're overloading you with information. That's how they're controlling you. They're blowing your mind, draining you of your energy and your focus, keeping you distracted because of all the information being thrown in your face. Think about it. Your phone, your computer, your day in and day out work, life, the things that you and your family have to deal with on a daily basis. So privacy and getting offline is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Just separate yourself from the world. Take time for you, you know? And when you go to build that family, that family connection, when you go to build your own business, think about it like this. What is healthy? Happiness. I think back at my foster mother, she once told me, I don't care what religion you get into, as long as you're happy. That's the way it's supposed to be. If you go into Judaism and Hebrewism, you have what is called bar mitzvah. This is when a child becomes a man and is a ritual that you do, that you go through, when that child is ready to become a man. Okay? See, here in the West, we call it puberty, basically. But through them in the old world, it's a ritual that is done, much like the Yom Kippur ritual of lots being cast. Same thing. But here it is. So you form that firm foundation. You bring in like-minded individuals that are there to help work with you for the common goals. If you're dating somebody, you want to work for the same goals. Okay? If one's working against the other, that's no good. That's FUBAR. Okay? That's FUBAR. Broken arrow, if you will. That relationship is done. Because if you can't work together to raise a family, to work for the same goals, nothing's going to be done. You're going to have one person so stressed out and the other sitting there going, ha, 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 knife in the back. We see too many of these young girls doing this to guys these days. I've experienced it. My nephew's experienced it. I've heard so many stories from guys today that they've walked away from the dating scene completely. Me, I chose to walk away because I don't want to be in that drama anymore. But here it is. But you've also got women who have done the same exact thing because they're tired of dealing with children. If you're going to have a family, you don't want to raise a family and be with another child. That's what part of being a man is. That's what being a woman is. It's about being an adult. Now, if you can't be mentally balanced, emotionally balanced, physically balanced, have your own hobbies, your own goals, set limits, be observant on everything around you. I believe it was Grim Hustle that said it best. He took little stones, white and black ones, and he said, each stone represents an hour of the day. 8 hours, set it aside because that's when you're sleeping. 1 hour when you get up, and an hour before you go to bed, no technology. Another hour, bam. That's family time. Here's an hour for working out, reading, and then the rest of the day, you're working. Wow. You're taking care of business. That's setting examples. That's setting structure for your day in and day out. It gets you disciplined. It gets you into a routine. Even Miyamoto Musashi put forth structure through the 21 Principles of Dakota. And for those of you who don't know, that's Bushido, by the way, the way of the samurai. Okay? And what it is that you're really structuring your day that's going to maximize everything around you. How do you bring up a healthy family? How do you provide for a family as a couple or as a single parent? I know there's a lot of single parents out there. You know, I may be a single dad, but I share my son with his mom. You see, I've spoken on this before. She and I went to a notary down at the bank, and we had it notarized that we're both taking 50-50, responsibility for our son's development. There was no drama, no warring, no nothing. You see, this is healthy. It sets that example for your child. It lets him say, wow, okay, even though my parents aren't together anymore, they still associate for my benefit. But also, they're both teaching me their traditions and their values. She used to take him to church a lot. I hated that aspect as an occultist. Okay? I find the JCI to be a cult, plain and simple. But that was her religion, and I respected that. Me, I'm a necromancer. Okay? I'm a former Satanist. I haven't practiced Satanism in about 8 years. But here it is. My son, he liked what I did more than what his mother did. But I also understand child development. The first 8 years, he needs his mom. The next 7 years, he needs his dad. The 7 years after that is him trying to figure out his purpose and meaning in life. It's different degrees of development. That's what these two books put forth. Not just faith, not just work, not just family, not just, mentalism or physical aspects, spiritualism, the whole kit and caboodle. They teach you about structure. They teach you about observance. They teach you to reflect on everything and then to strategize and have that knowledge and that wisdom that's going to benefit you in the long run within a balanced, maintained structure. Okay? That's what, in my opinion, that's what the infernals do for you. When you're working with the abyss, when you're working with demons, one of the things that I work with them on is, when I work with them, I always say, if it's not for me, remove it. I don't want this shit in my life if it is not going to benefit me and my family. I look at the first year that I started working the path of necromancy on a full-time basis. I saw so many people get removed from the job that were more experienced and been there longer than me. And then all of a sudden, I ended up being a closer. I ended up having to fill in once or twice as shift lead. I ended up getting a better job at a resident assisted living place where I worked my ass off and learned a lot about cooking. I became a chef, and I loved that. Okay? But you look at how being a chef and being an alchemist benefits you from a spiritualist perspective. Look at what we do with herbs and alchemy practices, chemistry, in witchcraft and sorcery today. Hell, all the time we use this stuff in different mannerisms. And then I went back to my former job, but worked for another owner. Before I knew it, I wasn't just a primary worker. I became the morning shift lead. Yeah, there was a lot of shit that I didn't agree with. I had to put up with a lot of stuff. But I taught my employees my job, just like you would in the military. Wow, that ranking system. You teach the person beneath you your job. So, because if you go down or you leave, they're going to have to know, how do you calibrate these machines? How do you clean these machines? How do you do the bake? What happens if the oven malfunctions? What do I do? Do you know how many times I got phone calls just on that alone at 3:30 in the morning? 4 o'clock in the morning, just before they're supposed to open the drive-through window? And then one day I just disappeared. Not a word. Showed up a week later, turned in everything, and just walked out. That killed them more than anything because, number one, they'll never find a worker like me again. But number two, they chose to put me on the blacklist. Well, who gives a fuck? Because I'm done with that line of work. But, I ended up starting my own business. I loved it. But I'm doing this for my family, not for them. I'm done working for money. I want money to work for me. So I started learning about finances. I started learning about structure. Wow. And you know what? It's benefited me over the last 3 years. Slowly, before I even got done, I started investing. Learning how to invest, how to get money to work for me. More so, by the time I was done, it was up and running, I just disappeared from the workforce. Just disappeared. That was 14 months ago. 14 months when I walked out in the middle of December. Just done. Not a word. And here I am with my own business, my own goals, benefiting my family. I am supplying things from my household, my son's mother's household, and I'm helping out with another household because I have the time, because I have people that I can say, hey, I need you to study this, or I need you to bring information up on this, and they'll go out and do it. I'm my own boss. I love it. More so, I get to go over and do favors for my son's landlord. My son's mother's landlord. I get to help my son's mother. I always have money, so when she needs something, like, say, something for the dogs or something for our son, it's like, here you go. Wow. I would never have the time to sit there and do that back when I was working for Duncan, when I was working for Warnerberry Heights, or Tractor Supply, or FedEx Ground, or any of the other jobs that I've had over the last 25, 30 years, because I started working when I was in junior high. I worked for the school system. I worked for the fire department. I worked for moving companies. I worked for package handling companies. I worked as a manager for, a groundskeeper for a trailer park for numerous years. I became a martial artist, worked my way up to black belt. I traveled from one side of this country to the other, studying under mages and sages, witches and warlocks, and I loved it. But now I get to do what I love to do at 47 years old. And these books were instrumental in helping me to derive this stuff, which is why I'm putting these books forth little bit by little bit for you, so that you can sit there, go out and get them and go, I want to do this too. I'm tired of working my ass off for nothing. I'm tired of the disrespect. I'm tired of being broke all the fucking time. I want to be better. Well, guess what? The Book of Meditations by Markus Aurelius is the first book I would recommend to you. The Science of Being Well would be the second book I would recommend to you. Get those books, read them, study them, apply them to your life, and get down to business. Honor will come. Okay? And the funny thing is the other day, I had somebody contact me in Messenger, from TikTok Messenger. And it was funny because she claimed to be associated with somebody that I admire, Grim Hustle. And it was funny because I put forth all the books that he recommended, the books that I'm now sharing with you. Okay? All of a sudden, that tone changed. Oh my God, you're a Grim? Duh. Have you not looked at my profile? Have you not noticed all the books that I posted? How about all the rituals that I posted on? How about all my dog, the animal photos and events that I've put in there over the last 3 years? The last 3 or 4 years. Wow. Okay. But that's going to surprise you? Wow. Okay. So this is how you become free. This is how you free your mind and connect to your psyche. This is how you free your mind and separate and connect to your psyche. First of all, get away from the fucking world. Get rid of that BS, that shit. Get rid of it. It's useless as tits on a nun. You want to become happy? You want to become better? Do it. All right? Now, let's see here. Laura Hernandez. Hello. Welcome to the channel. Tyler F4B2D. I am having a good day. It's snowing out. Had a good coffee from, I took a friend over to Dunkin', got a coffee. Been sitting in my recliner, watching the snow fall, and it's basically winter's last gasp before springtime. Loving it. So, let's see. Mackenzie Z Clubhouse. Happy birthday. Yeah. It's always a good time to socialize about yourself. Always. It's the most honored day of the year is your own birthday. So spoil yourself rotten, Mackenzie. That's what I got to tell you. You want to go get your nails done? You want, get a pedicure or whatever they call that? Do it. Go get a massage. Go out to eat. Spoil yourself rotten. Leo Blandford 9776. Welcome, brother. So, anyways. But I do recommend the older the works, the better. Okay? Not this new age bullshit. Because it's all watered down, it's corrupted, it's limited. You want the pure sense, go with the older books. A lot of the books that I'm showing you is from the 18th century forward, up to about the 1970s. There is a couple that has come out in the last 20 years. So, keep that in mind too. But anyways, with that said, if you like what I do and what I put forth, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Feel free to hit that notification button so you don't miss my next videos. And I want to thank everybody that's communed here. Those who are going to come on at a later time, cool, welcome. It's an honor having you here. And until next time, I'm out.